I still remember one particular night when I was asked to watch over my cousin and a group of us for friends during a sleepover at my uncle, and I thought it would be the easiest $100 I'd ever make because, honestly, most of the night was just me sitting in the basement, playing video games with a bunch of 10-year-olds who were more than happy to stay glued to the screen. But the night took a turn that I'll never forget when, in the middle of the laughter and button mashing, I suddenly heard slow, deliberate footsteps from upstairs. And at first I thought maybe I was just imagining it. But when two of the kids glanced at me with that same uneasy expression, I knew I wasn't the only one who noticed. And my stomach dropped when I quickly counted the kids on the couch as 5 in total, all accounted for, meaning no one else was supposed to be inside, especially since my aunt and uncle weren't home. And as the realization hit me, I actually swallowed the gum I was chewing out of pure nerves. Because when I looked back toward the stairwell, the basement door was wide open, something I knew for sure had been closed earlier. So I told the kids as calmly as I could to stay put while I crept upstairs just enough to shut the door, though I hated that it only locked from the outside, which meant there was no way for me to secure us in the basement. And I quickly called back down for the kids to move into the workout room. Then I switched off the TV and all the lights to make the place look empty before slipping into the workout room with them, closing the door behind us. And in the dark, we all listened together as the creak of footsteps grew louder and louder, until the sound of the basement door opening made every hair on my body stand up, followed by heavy, steady steps thudding on the wooden stairs one by one. And one of the kids started quietly crying, which made me whisper harshly for them to be quiet, because I needed silence to figure out what was happening. And in a rush, I pushed a chair and a pile of barbell weights against the workout room door, pressing my own weight into it too. While outside, we heard the sound of another door opening the boiler room, this time then closing again. And just when I thought maybe whoever it was had left, the handle to the workout room door rattled, someone actually trying to push it open. But when I shoved with everything I had, the person seemed to give up and the footsteps retreated, moving fast up the stairs until we could hear them right above us, crossing toward the front of the house, and eventually the sound faded, which gave me enough courage to search once things felt quiet. And when I finally walked through the house, I found the front door wide open and the upstairs bedrooms ransacked with a few things missing. So yes, it was definitely a break-in, but thankfully everyone was safe, and even though we lost some belongings that night, the relief that no kid was hurt was all that really mattered. It was during a harsh winter storm in Valley Stream when I agreed to babysit for a couple who were going away for the weekend, and they offered me $150 to watch their little boy, Matthew, which felt like easy money since he was already in bed by the time I got there, leaving me to relax in the living room and watch a movie while the snow piled up outside. But not long before midnight, there came a knock at the front door. That immediately made my heart race because nobody I knew should be visiting at that hour. And when I hesitated and ignored it, within seconds the knocking turned into furious pounding along with angry voices shouting for me to open the door, and I froze in place staring at the door, like it might burst open at any second. Then out of instinct, I peeked through the blinds and nearly collapsed backward when I saw a shadowy figure standing directly outside the window, face almost pressed to the glass. And my chest tightened as I stumbled into the kitchen to grab the landline phone because this was long before I had my own cell, and I called the police with shaky hands, trying to explain what was happening, but the dispatcher told me the snowstorm was making the roads nearly impossible to navigate and that it could take a while before officers arrived, which only made me more panicked, though they did tell me to take the child and hide somewhere until help came. But my fear got the better of me and I hung up too soon, wanting to act quickly. Yet when I rushed back into the living room, the pounding had suddenly stopped, the silence somehow worse, and just when I thought maybe they had left, the sound of glass shattering echoed from one of the back rooms, confirming that whoever they were now inside, and my knees almost buckled under me at the realization. So I sprinted up the stairs to grab Matthew, covering his mouth so he wouldn't make a sound. and pulled him into the small toy closet in his bedroom where we crouched together in the dark. Every second dragging like an eternity as footsteps creaked up the stairs followed by low, mocking laughter. More than one voice. Definitely more than one person. And when they entered the bedroom, I held Matthew close, convinced this was where my life ended, staring at the closet door handle while imagining it slowly turning. But before they reached us, the sound of distant police sirens cut through the night, even muffled by the storm, and I heard one of the men curse under his breath. Before all their footsteps thundered back down the stairs in a rush, the front door slamming. And moments later, the house filled with the flashing lights of patrol cars, and as it turned out, the officers caught up with them not far from the property. 5 men in total rested after trying to hide near the shed, and I was left shaking, holding on to Matthew, realizing that at only 15 years old, I had just faced the most terrifying night of my life. One that I would never be able to forget no matter how much I wanted to. Back when I was about 15, I was babysitting a boy named Mike at his house, and since he had a dog that needed walking, we decided to take him for a short stroll into the wooded area behind the property, which seemed harmless at first, but midway through the trail, the dog suddenly froze ears stiff and poised before it started barking and pulling like crazy at the leash, and I thought maybe it had spotted a deer or even a bear. So I quickly told Mike to turn back toward the house, while I tried to tug the dog in the same direction. But then I noticed what had really caught its attention, because just beyond a tree line I could make out the shape of a man standing completely still, not moving, just watching. And when I nervously called out to ask if he needed something, the stranger turned and walked away without a word, which should have eased my nerves, but instead left me rattled, because something about the way he had been standing there felt wrong. And as we hurried back, the dog suddenly erupted again, barking and jerking at the leash as if someone was following us. Though when I looked over my shoulder, I couldn't see anyone, and I kept telling myself not to panic. But the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. So I rushed Mike back inside and locked every door and window, though for a while the dog remained restless, pacing and growling at corners of the room, until eventually things seemed calm enough for us to relax and play some Mario Kart like nothing had happened. But deep down, I couldn't shake the thought that the man might still be out there. And my fears proved right when later that night we heard a loud clatter on the back patio, like something had been knocked over. And when I flicked on the patio light, I saw one of the buckets of toys spilled across the ground in a way no small animal could have managed, while the dog went wild again, barking toward the glass door. And I tried to convince myself it was just the wind until I caught a glimpse of movement in the darkness, a figure walking past the window, and this time, he stopped, crouching slightly as he looked directly at me, and it felt like his eyes pierced straight into mine, chilling me to the bone. And in my panic, I told Mike to get his dad's hunting rifle from the cabinet, which was probably irresponsible considering he was only 8, but fear took over logic. And when I raised the gun toward the window, the man didn't immediately flee. He just stood there with that unnerving crouched posture, before finally disappearing back into the woods, leaving me shaken for the rest of the night, jumping at every creak and snap of the house until the sun came up. And a week later, Mike's parents told me that a strange man had been spotted lurking near their property more than once, clearly stalking the house. And when they asked me to describe him, I couldn't give many details, because his face had never been clear. But I knew it was the same person. And though they begged me to keep babysitting afterward, I refused, because no amount of money was worth the feeling I had that night of being hunted in the dark by someone who might have wanted to do far worse than just watch from the trees. Between the ages of 15 and 18, I did a lot of babysitting, and since I lived near a more well-off neighborhood, the jobs paid well, though some kids were definitely stranger than others. And the one that stuck with me the most was a boy named Michael, who was 12 at the time, old enough that you might wonder why he even needed a sitter. But his parents said they preferred someone to stay overnight, and hinted that he could be a little unusual and might need extra attention. And when I met him, I understood why. Because he was extremely quiet, almost distant, the kind of kid who seemed lost in his own world. But since I didn't want to be the nosy sitter, I mostly let him do his own thing. And most of his time was spent in this massive toy closet upstairs that was bigger than some bedrooms, large enough to hold a play table full of Legos and bins of toys. And every time I passed by, I could hear him in there talking, not playful chatter, but full conversations. Though I never heard another voice respond, which made me think maybe he had an imaginary friend or some kind of condition his parents hadn't fully explained. So I shrugged it off until later that night when I told him it was time for bed, and he finally left the closet reluctantly, almost like he didn't want to leave whoever or whatever he was talking to. And after he was tucked into his room, I finally went to lie down in the guest room, which oddly enough was right next to the toy closet. And sometime in the middle of the night, I was woken by faint sounds, the distinct clink of Legos being shuffled and the low murmur of a voice. So assuming Michael had gotten back up, I called out to him, telling him it was late and he needed to sleep. And the noises stopped immediately, leaving the room in unsettling silence. And I noticed that the closet light wasn't on, which confused me because I didn't understand how he could be building or playing in the dark. So I got up and cracked the door open, flicking on the light. But the closet was empty, the toys undisturbed, no Michael in sight. And trying not to spook myself, I went back to bed, convincing myself I was overtired. But about an hour later, I woke again, this time to the glow of the closet light shining under the door, even though I hadn't turned it on. And with my heart pounding, I sat up and saw the clear shadow of 2 feet under the crack of the door, perfectly still, like someone was standing right there inside. And then came a faint giggle, high-pitched and chilling, and I snapped, marching over and yanking the door open, only to stumble back in shock when there was no one inside, no Michael, nothing that could have cast those shadows. And for a second I honestly couldn't breathe because I knew what I had seen and heard, and yet the closet stood empty and silent and terrified. I ran to Michael's bedroom only to find him fast asleep in his bed, his breathing steady, his blanket still tucked around him as if he hadn't moved all night. And I was so shaken that I locked his door from the inside and lay down on the floor beside his bed, just to feel a little safer being near another person, even if that person was a sleeping 12-year-old. And though I eventually dozed off again, the hours dragged until morning when his parents returned, cheerful and casual, like nothing was wrong. And I decided not to tell them what had happened, partly because I didn't want them to think I was crazy, but mostly because I didn't know how to even explain it myself. Because I knew what I experienced was real, and it still gives me chills to think about to this day. The sound of those toys being moved in the dark, the outlines of feet waiting silently in the closet, and that mocking giggle that didn't belong to Michael or to anyone I could explain. And though I got paid for the job and never had to watch him again, that night stayed with me as one of the few times in my life I felt certain I was in the presence of something I couldn't understand, something not human that seemed to take pleasure in being noticed.